Molly Hurford, thank you for joining us, our rankings guru. Let's run down your domestic rankings this week. I guess to start off, women, who do you have in number one?
I mean, I feel like you can't have anyone other than Ellen Noble in number one for this season so far. She's having the season of a lifetime. It's incredible to watch.
Yeah, you not only have her topping our domestic rankings, but also our international rankings. We'll get into that next week with our international rankings show. But I mean, for me, Ellen, her dominance, she's been doubling up wins both weekends. Is it the last 3 weeks of the domestic cyclocross season that she's swept these weekend races?
Yeah, not the last three, but this past one in Cincy. She took a weekend off actually last weekend to really get ready because she knew Cincy's a C1. She knew Pan Ams are coming next week. It's going to be really hectic travel for her. I think she's going over to Europe right after Pan Am. So, she needed like a week off, especially after the clinic that she basically put on at Gloucester, just led tape to tape both days. It was amazing.
And you're obviously good friends with her, manager on her team last year. What do you think it is about her season? I think the most impressive thing for me is that she seems to have it over Katie Keogh this year, which, last season we really saw that Ellen struggled to beat Katie Keogh. At Nationals, it seemed like she finally got over that hump. Second at Nationals over Katie Keogh and it's not like Katie Keogh has had a bad season. Top 10 in a World Cup. She won a World Cup. What do you think it is in these over this last month that's allowed Ellen to beat Katie domestically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I mean, first of all, it's important to remember Ellen is only 22. I mean, it seems like she's been around and racing and, doing really well for a lot of years, but really she's actually quite young in the sport still. She's just out of the U23 field. We just don't see that as obviously in the women's field because they still race the elite women as soon as they're 17. So there's that. But I think the other big things are she's on a new team that's, super supportive. Not that Aspire Racing wasn't amazing, but now she's kind of on this team that's really focused on her. She's now done the super pro thing for a couple of years now. Aspire was her first real pro team where, everything was being taken care of and stuff. And that's a big adjustment. That was a huge change. I know her food is a lot more dialed in. Her nutrition is super dialed. She's been now working with the same coach for a few years and, they're just building season on season. And she had a great season last year. So I think we're really just seeing kind of the fruits of all of that starting to come together more and really mesh really, really well.
And let's talk about Pan Ams. For domestic racers, this is a huge event. More UCI points on the table for a Pan Am championship than even for the national title. It might not carry the same weight for sponsors as wearing the stars and stripes, but for racers wanting start line position internationally, this is a huge event. You had a hot take that the 14-time reigning national champion might not be at the start line at the Pan Am National Championships.
Yeah, so Katie Compton is sort of finally back on the scene with her third place in the Bern World Cup last weekend, but I kind of expect that she's going to stay over in Europe now that she's there. She's adjusted. She's very serious about the DVV series. She raced it last year and did really well in it. I don't see her coming back just for the sake of Pan Ams, to be honest. It's a really long flight. It's not necessarily the cost of travel. It's the, physical toll that travel takes. That 6-hour time shift, it's so hard on racers. So I would put money on the fact that she won't be at Pan Ams, although I'm sure she'll be at Nationals.
Yeah, it'll be interesting and maybe open the door for someone like Katie Keogh or Ellen Noble to take that Continental Championship. And I think just the confidence of wearing a championship jersey like that might give Katie Compton a run for her money at the Nationals. I think we're seeing these national championships get tighter year on year, and maybe this is the year that Katie Compton finally loses. But I wouldn't bet on that personally. I wouldn't take that bet.
Yeah, seriously. all of those, but because it's Pan Ams, you also could have Magali Rochette actually really surprising everyone taking that win. She's been one of the only ones that's been able to beat Ellen this season. She had a great race in Bern as well. She was 6th, so she could definitely be in contention. And actually, Ruby West, very young, I would put her, she could podium at Pan Ams. I don't know about winning. That would be pretty crazy. But it's a course that's almost her home course. It's about an hour from where she lives. And she just won both days at Sherbrooke last weekend. So she could be a contender.
All right, yeah. Let's. I want to run down some of the rankings of the riders we've been naming here. Katie Keogh's 2nd overall in our rankings, ahead of Katie Compton, who sits in 3rd. Generally has a slower start to the season, and kind of as the weather gets colder, the allergens lessen. We'll see her certainly come onto form and potentially move up in these rankings as the season moves along. Magali Rochette is in 4th. Has had incredible results all year long. We saw her just dominate Reno Cross. And as well as Rochester at the start of the season. And then Ruby West down in 11th. But like you said, look for her to start climbing up the rankings, and maybe based on a strong performance this at the coming Pan Am Championships. Let's give a shout out to some of the riders in the rankings that have surprised you this season. Who do you have ranked in here that has kind of outperformed your expectations?
Okay, so I'm going to have to start with Sunny Gilbert. She's actually one of the older riders. She's 39. She's a full-time biochemist, and she's always been in the top 10. Like since I was racing 10 years ago, she was always in the field. She's lives up to her name. She's one of the happiest, most pleasant racers to be around. And this year, she has had an amazing season. She won both days at DCCX. She's, doing really well, not just in those smaller, more like local UCI races, but she's actually doing super well in the big races, getting in the top 5, definitely in the top 10. So she's really surprised me with how up there she's been. Her and then Clara Hansinger and Katie Klaus. Both of them are under 20. Katie's only 17. Clara's 21, but still U23. They've both been on multiple podiums this season. Clara was top 10 in Cincy both days, 6th in day 1. She's just having one of the best seasons I've ever seen a newer rider have.
Yeah, and for me also, seeing Katie Klaus coming off really impressive road season. I talked to her after the Junior World Championships road race in Innsbruck, Austria. Asked her, when she was planning on getting her cyclocross season started, and I think the race was on like Wednesday or Thursday, and she said, yeah, this weekend.
Actually, fly back tomorrow to do the Cyclocross World Cup.
So, a young rider like that, competing across multiple disciplines, super impressive. Let's move on to the men's rankings, and I think item you brought up that is really interesting is just there's no cohesive series this year for domestic racing. There's UCI races all over the country, racers spread all over the country, and that seems to have really affected the men's side especially.
Definitely, yeah. In the women's side, it's still pretty obvious, I think, like within the top 10, top 15, who's number one, if you will. But then in the men's side, I think everyone in the top 25 at this point has podiumed at a UCI race in the past 8 weeks, which makes it very, very difficult to kind of assign rankings.
I don't want to forget to mention who's still leading our rankings, Kerry Werner. And, as phenomenal a season he's had, always a really scrappy, tenacious racer. He is maybe leading our rankings because 1 and 2 at 2018 National Championships, Jeremy Powers and Stephen Hyde have suffered some health issues this year.
Yeah, so Stephen has been out with, I believe, a broken sternum was the official diagnosis after the first 5 minutes of the Trek World Cup, actually. It was very depressing to see him, leaving the scene for gosh, the past month and a half now that I actually would do the math on it, the season's flown by. Can we just mention that? It feels like there's been a million races already. So Stephen just came back, and he did get on the podium on day 2 of Cincy. He made it into the top 10 on the first day, so he is coming back, but he's not there yet. Jeremy Powers had a great first weekend in Rochester, did really well, was in the lead group both days, but then got a really bad infection, has been out for almost 2 months because of that. So he's still in the rankings because, honestly, I still firmly believe that when Jeremy is racing healthy, he is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and I have high hopes that he's getting back there. But yeah, for right now, Kerry Werner is pretty untouchable in that top spot. He's won tons of races this season. He's podiumed at pretty much every race he's been at. He's having a phenomenal season for him.
And then let's talk about a racer that you have been a little bit down on, to be honest, Tobin Ortenblad.
Sorry, Tobin. It's not you.
But only because he set really high expectations last year with a really, I would call it, dominant early season, won a number of races, and was really giving riders like Werner, Hyde, Powers, everyone else a run for their money. Was a favorite coming into nationals. My take on Tobin is that he's playing a bit of a long game. He came out really strong early last year and kind of faded by nationals, and then really kind of had a rough go of it when he went over to Europe and was preparing for Worlds. So maybe he does have an eye on December, January, and February instead of September, October, and November this year.
I don't disagree, but I will say, the clock's ticking, there's been a lot of points left on the table. There's a lot of money left on the table with those points. And I think Pan Am's might actually be a great chance to see, is he really coming out and fighting? Because, that would be one of the big races that he should probably be peaking for if he wants to have a decent start spot in Europe, if Europe is part of his plan. If he wants to really test the waters for nationals, because between Pan Ams and nationals, there's not a ton of big domestic stuff happening. So I think if we don't see much from him next weekend, I'm going to have more critical things to say, but I could be totally proven wrong. And last year was him coming out last year and having those results was just amazing. It was one of the coolest things I'd seen, having a rider that, had always done well, but just suddenly is boom, out there winning, and everyone's like, holy crap, is that Tobin? Was, really great. And to do it all on a solo program and figuring all of that out himself, good on him.
Yeah, and I think too, if you're, we should be clear, we're coming at this more from a fan's perspective, that we want to see.
The place of love.
We want to see. It was, like you said, it was so exciting to see a new racer really, challenging for the podium and for the win in the elite men's races. And so it has been a little disappointing not to have, Tobin up there week after week, and he is a very dynamic, exciting racer. Currently sitting 5th overall in our ranking, so it's not like he's having a horrible year by any stretch. Yeah. I do want to mention one of my favorite racers, Gage Hecht. He really came on the scene last year and was challenging Stephen Hyde and just really showed, not only is he a talented cyclocross racer, but just seems to have a huge engine. We've seen him do incredible things on the road this year, won a stage of the Colorado Classic. And yeah, he's really, really impressive. Won his first UCI race in Cincy this weekend.
Or first C1. He's had some C2 wins.
Right.
And yeah, I will add that Gage is one of the most impressive, he's only 20 years old, and he's, to me, one of the most impressive men in the elite field because he's still so humble and so sweet and so kind, in addition to just being an amazing racer. And he's always a very positive racer. I've never seen him use a single negative tactic. I just think he's one of the classiest guys out there.
All right, well, let's wrap it up. We'll look forward to your international cyclocross rankings next week. And final thoughts on these domestic rankings. Who are your picks on the men's and women's side for Pan Ams?
Ooh, I think it's going to come down to Ellen and Katie Keogh in the front of the women's race. I would love to see Magali Rochette up there too, though. So could be any one of those three. For the men's, it's so hard to say.
Wait! You didn't pick somebody.
I know. Did you notice that? That was really sneaky, wasn't it? You know what? I have to say Ellen.
Okay.
Like, I just, she's pretty comfortable up here. This isn't that far out of her like local zone. She's not going to be traveling that far to get up here. It's about an hour flight for her, so she's going to be super fresh. I think she's going to do awesome.
I'm going to go with Magali. She is a Canadian, and Pan Ams are in Canada, so that's my rationale there.
Well, don't forget, she's from Quebec, and this is Ontario, so
fair point.
It's very different places, and she's coming in from Europe, so she's not going to be quite as fresh. So that's my theory.
All right.
On the men's side, it's a tough call. I think there's a chance that Steven could actually come back for it. I think, he kind of made a point on that podium on Sunday that he's still totally in contention. So I'd love to be surprised by seeing him come back, but I think at this point, Kerry Werner is just on fire. So I'd probably put my money on him.
Yeah, I don't see Kerry Werner losing Pan Ams. And I think similar to Katie Compton potentially missing Pan Ams on the women's side and opening the door for someone else to wear that jersey on the men's side, having Steven and Powers coming back from injury and illness really opens the door for another elite male to take that title and wear the jersey, and we'll make it exciting nonetheless. So
I think the last point about that, though, is there's also a U23 men's field at Pan Am. So about half of our domestic list is made up of U23 guys. So there's a chance that this is going to completely change all of the rankings, because we're going to have, Gage Hecht could also be Pan Am champ for U23. Yeah. So both of them could be on the podium.
Yeah, fair point. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next week with our international rankings.
Bye, guys.